Hello everyone and welcome to round 3 of the FIDE Grand Swiss tournament. It's Alireza Firouzja versus Alexandr Predke, a really nice game that we're going to check out. As we said during the last video, the only players in round 3 that are still on 2 points are Firouzja, Alexandr Predke here, and Ivan Šarić of Croatia, who fought against Fabiano Caruana in round 3. We're also going to mention that game, but we are not going to be covering it, so let's check out what happened here. So Firouzja with the white pieces opens with e4. Sorry about that. We have e5 by Predke. If you guys haven't seen it, check out Predke's previous game. We've shown it. It's a beautiful, beautiful queen sacrifice. In case you've missed it, the link will be the first thing you see in the description below. So knight to f3, knight to c6, and bishop to b5. The Ruy Lopez is on the board. We have a6, Morphy's defense, bishop to a4, and now knight to f6. So here we have castles, bishop to e7, and now rook to e1. So this is all very, very standard Ruy Lopezian stuff. We have b5 and now bishop back to b3 and now d6. Of course, you could go for castle, something like c3 and then d5 if you're interested in the martial attack. But Predke says that he wants the closed setup with the d6. So Firouzja goes c3. We have castles and now h3. And here, usually people just go knight a5, then the bishop moves back. We can play c5, then d4. You guys have seen this many times. But here we have rook to e8. So still waiting with that knight maneuver, and the knight might not even go to a5. The knight might go to b8, and then the c5 pawn will be pushed. So here we're preparing the standard maneuver. Rook to e8, the bishop is coming to f8, then the rook will control the e file. d4, grabbing more space in the center, and bishop to b7. We have knight b to d2 and bishop to f8 now. So this is all very, very standard stuff. We have a3. A4 again is the usual idea here. When black advances these pawns to a6 and b5, you want to try and undermine them with a4, but a3 also very much playable. We have h6 and now bishop to c2. So now there's really no point in the knight going to a5. Usually you want to do it with tempo as you attack the bishop on b3. So here we have knight back to b8, preparing that c5 push, and now b3. Again, b4 also possible, but here Firouzja goes for b3. Knight b to d7, and now bishop to b2. And here, again, g6 is very much playable. Here, c6 is a known move. But here we have rook to b8. It's a very rare idea, but it's been played a few times. And there's a very notable game where pawn to a4 was played. It was Rajabov versus Carlsen in the 2014 Vugar Gashimov Memorial. That game ended in a draw, and there are a couple of other games where a4 was played. But now, as the rook is here, and well, if the position opens up, then this rook might be doing some damage here on the queen side. The bishop here is undefended. Firouzja just plays rook to b1, and it is now only as of move 16 that we have a completely new game. And now is what we're interested in. So here we have g6 and bishop to d3 now, preparing queen to c2. So c6, still waiting, not advancing the pawns too far, and queen to c2. We have knight to h5. The knight can now come to g7 and then to e6, and from there, well, it's just going to be a very strong piece. We have bishop to f1, a well-known maneuver with the light square bishop in the Ruy Lopez. You just tuck it in for later, and it's well, it's still a very powerful piece there, doing a lot of pressure here on the queen side. A4 can always be played, but also just adding more defense to the king side. So knight to g7, and now d captures on e5. We have d captures and now c4. This is how Alireza frees up his dark square bishop. And what can black play here? Well, he starts with rook to c8 and now rook b to d1. Aligning the rook with the queen on the d file, as this is the only open file on the board. So queen to e7 and now even c5, and this is the really, really tricky move. The thing is, what can you play here? Well, if you just ignore the pawn, because the pawn can be captured by the queen and by the knight. But if, for example, you just ignore it, you play something like a5, then b4, and white will be very happy with his setup here. On the queen side, another thing, if you capture with the queen, for example, queen captures on c5, then we have this knight to c4 move. as the knight on d7 is also undefended. So we want to grab that, then we want to grab that, and we don't care about this. And now after the rook defends, rook to c7, now we play b4, chase away the queen, and after queen e7, now 3 of our pieces are attacking the e5 pawn, so we just recollect our material. Knight captures, and bishop captures, for example, and white can be very, very happy with this position. So you can see it's not actually a free pawn, but you could also capture it with the knight. This is what Alexandr does, and now we have knight captures on e5, because one of the defenders of the knight had just moved. Knight back to d7, and now again knight d to c4. Crazy stuff, but now the knight on d7 is actually attacked twice, so you don't mind if black captures on c4, and you know, there's really no point in that. Rook captures would be just too strong. So black is forced to capture on e5. We have knight captures on e5, and now rook e to d8, offering a trade here. And we have queen to c3, putting more pressure here on this diagonal. Okay, the bishop is guarding the knight here, so there's no checkmating pressure. But it's not all that easy for black to find a move, because trading along the d file doesn't really do anything for black. If anything, it helps white. You really want to play this c5 move. It's really a wonder that it still hasn't been played, but here it just loses by force. Knight g4 and white wins. There's no good defense here against knight to f6 check. Also, the h6 pawn is hanging, so it doesn't really matter what you do here. If you try something like king h7 to defend it, still we're going to play knight f6 check, king h8, and now queen to c1. Again, we're going after this pawn, and if g5, then, well, we can just trade ones, for example, captures, and play h4, and then black's position is falling apart here. So, of course, Alexandr knows this, and he plays h5. He takes away the g4 square from the white knight, and now Alireza trades once. We have rook captures, queen captures, and rook to e3 now. And here, the rook is a really strong attacking piece, because it can be shifted to the f file, it can be shifted to the g file, it can be shifted to the d file. All depends on what black plays. So here we have rook to c7, adding another defender here, but now rook to d3, chasing the queen away, queen to e7, and now queen to d2, preparing rook to d7. And now black really doesn't have a better move than just playing bishop back to c8, because you haven't played c5 you know, yet, and it doesn't seem like you will be playing it well anytime soon, but you might. We'll see what happens. So here we have f4. Now the d7 square is nicely covered, and now black finally takes this opportunity to play c5, and it was about time. And now Alireza has to decide how to continue this. His pieces are positioned nicely, but he has to play very, very precisely. So you could shift the rook somewhere to f3, to g3, like we discussed. g3 does seem very nice, preparing f5, but instead he plays rook to f3. You'll see why. We have knight to e6 now, and here comes a4. It's much too early for f5. If you play f5, knight to d4 attacks the rook here, and even if you capture, then bishop g7, and well, you have problems now. How are you going to defend this? You're going to lose this knight. So Firouzja first tries to create some weaknesses on the queen side. Our good friend, the light square bishop, also helping out with this. So knight to d4, attacking the rook here, but now we have bishop captures, c captures, and a captures on b5. We have a captures on b5 and bishop captures on b5. So for the moment, white is up a pawn, but we'll see if he will be able to hang on to it. We have queen to b4, offering a queen trade, and now Alireza just trades. We have queen captures, bishop captures, and the bishop to c4, not allowing any rook to c2 or rook to c1 ideas, but also just putting more pressure on the f7 pawn. So king to g7, now unpinning from this diagonal, and now rook to f2. Now Alireza would very much enjoy bringing his rook into the attack as soon as possible, but black prevents this. We have rook to a7. He's the one who wants to activate his rook, and now knight to c6, attacking the bishop and the rook here. So rook to a1 with check, rook to f1 blocking, and now rook captures. We have king captures, and now bishop to d2. And now, okay, you cannot defend this pawn, but Alireza uses this time wisely. So black had to waste a few tempi to go after this pawn to recollect material, but now just king to e2. We have bishop captures on f4, now king d3. This pawn can now not be defended, and now we have bishop to d7. attacks the knight here. So now we just recollect here. Knight captures on d4, or rather collect. We are up a pawn. And how can black continue playing this? Well, white's plan is to hopefully bring the king somewhere here and advance this pawn all the way and promote it into a queen. So black needs to prevent this. We have g5 and now king to c3. We have bishop to e5, not allowing the further advancement of the king as the knight would hang. So bishop to e2, attacking the pawn here, and just g4. We have h captures, and now king to c4. This is how we make progress. King to f6, and now king to d5. We have bishop to c8. Now we're going for some bishop to b7 check action, and then maybe you can collect the d4 pawn. But now Firouzja just goes b4. He says this will not work. So bishop to b7 check, knight to c6, and now you can't really do anything about this. The knight actually defends this position really well. So g3, you don't want this pawn to remain a target here, and now b5. We have bishop to c7, not allowing the pawn to go any further, and now king to c5, and now we will be pushing b6. So king g5, now comes e5. Even this is possible, and king to f4, attacking the pawn twice, but it doesn't matter. Alireza just plays bishop to f3, and now if you go after the pawn, bishop captures, we're gonna play knight captures, and now it doesn't matter what you play. If you go if you play bishop captures on f3, we're just gonna capture it with the knight. And if you go after the knight, it doesn't do you any good, because we're going to capture the bishop on b7, and then our pawn can easily be promoted to a queen. So after bishop to f3, king to e3 was played, but now we have b6. Chasing away the bishop to b8, and now knight captures on b8. Other than this, you really didn't have a good move. You can't go here, you can't go here, so you have to give it up somewhere. You could capture the passed pawn, but the end result is just this endgame, which is also winning for white, so it doesn't really make much difference. So here, black tried this. It's sort of a tricky idea, but one that is very unlikely to succeed. Knight captures on b8, and now bishop captures on f3. This is what black's last attempt is. So feel free to pause the video here and find a winning move for Alireza here while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on not playing g captures on f3, because this will simply not do. And for those of you who have found it, you are, again, a true master of the endgame. So congratulations, knight to c6 is the move. Of course, if we capture the bishop, then g2, and this pawn is now a problem. Knight to c6, we can bring a queen into the game, and after b7, we can simply capture and open up a discovery here. King d6, and white is still better, but is it enough for a win? Well, we simply do not want to find out. So instead, just knight to c6, blocking the bishop's reach to the b7 square, and now bishop captures on g2. We have b7, and now unfortunately you do not have bishop captures on c6. If you had this, then perhaps it would still be playable. The problem is, after bishop captures on c6, of course not b8 queen. First we capture here, and now after g2, b8 queen, g1 queen, you have this unfortunate queen to a7 check, or queen to b6 check for that matter. Now the black king cannot keep defending the black queen. You have to move the king, and now we simply pick up the queen. So that will be a problem. So the bishop has to move, but you can't move it with tempo. So bishop to e4 was played, now b8 queen, and now we have g2, but Firouzja just plays queen to b2, and it was in this position on move 63 that Alexandr Predke resigned the game, and another excellent victory for Alireza Firouzja, who is now the only player in the Grand Swiss with 3 out of 3. So we'll see if he can keep this going. If he wins it or qualifies for the top 2 places, he goes straight into the candidates tournament. So that would be a great achievement for him. Well, yeah, here you resign, because it doesn't really matter what you do. If you bring a queen into the game, then just queen d4 check, and again the king cannot defend the queen. And if you try some silly maneuvers, like maybe bishop here to try and block something, we simply play knight to d4, and after the queen gets into the game, just queen c3 check, king f4, we can pick up the bishop, king g5, queen f6 check, and everything is good here. We can deliver this check, king g4, we can deliver this check, king here, we can pick up the queen, and we always win this. So of course Predke knows this, and after queen to b2 he resigned the game. If you guys are wondering what happened in the game between Caruana and Šarić, Šarić also the only player that was on 2 out of 2 going into round 3. It was a really hard fought game, but in the end it ended in a draw. Fabi was really pushing, but he could not convert. He was up a pawn in bishops of opposite colored endgame. Then he had the opportunity to grab another pawn, but it simply wasn't enough. There was a one point in the game where Fabi could have gained the winning advantage, but those are some silly engine ideas. But yeah, now for the actual standings, not for the standings, but the thing that I promised you, we're not interested in the standings just yet. Firouzja is leading, he's the only one on 3 out of 3, but I promised you the live ratings list, as I messed up in one of my previous videos. So here it is, and what it looks like. So these are the live ratings, not the actual ratings. Magnus, of course, still in first place, but we're not interested in that. Look at Firouzja. He is number 6 in the world currently in the live ratings list. 1 point behind Levon Arunian, who is also playing in this tournament. So he could, if Firouzja continues this, he could easily overtake not just Arunian, but also Jan Nepomniachtchi, and climb up all the way to number 4. Fabi, not as likely, but if Fabi loses a few points and Firouzja gains, he might even climb up all the way to number 3, but that requires like steady winning, and that's very unrealistic. But just saying it could happen. So yeah, that's the game and some additional info on the tournament. Hope you guys enjoyed that. I would like to thank Miklos Madarash, Gustavo Fernandez, Derek King, THCOlly.nl, and George Northworthy for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing the coverage of the Grand Swiss, checking up on your wonderful suggestions and whatever else is happening in the chess world. So thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.